Hey guys, tonight we travel back to ancient Rome, a place of marble columns, smoky bathhouses, bustling markets, and just enough indoor plumbing to make you wish for modern plumbing. You're there now, in a tunic you don't know how to wear properly, your sandals are the wrong style for your social class, and you're sweating through wool because, well, everyone else is doing it. You're a visitor here, or maybe you just woken up in the middle of the Forum Romanum, surrounded by shouting vendors, clanging carts, and an uncomfortable smell of goat, garlic, and ambition. There's beauty, sure. Glorious arches and distant temples shimmer in the heat. But there's also danger in the air, and not just from pickpockets or falling tiles. Rome is loud, fast, and full of rules nobody's explained to you. You are deeply unprepared, and it shows. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, post your location and local time down below. I love seeing where in the world and what hour of insomnia you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You blink. Sunlight reflects off a whitewashed wall with such ferocity, it makes your eyes water. You cover your face with your hand, but it's too late. You're already dizzy from the glare. That's when the city hits you. The first thing is the noise. Romans don't do quiet. Carts rattle over uneven stone paving, pulled by donkeys that sound personally offended to be awake. Hawkers yell everything from figs to fish sauce. Somewhere nearby, someone's rehearsing a public speech, or just yelling at pigeons. It's hard to tell. The Forum itself is packed, and no one's moving slowly. If you pause too long, someone bumps into you, mutters stult, and keeps walking. You're pretty sure that wasn't a compliment. Then comes the smell, a swirl of perfume, overripe fruit, warm bread, unwashed tunics, sweat, animal dung, and mystery liquids. You breathe through your mouth. Bad idea. Even worse. A woman nearby is trying to sell you something in Latin. Maybe a love charm? Maybe a rat on a stick? Hard to say. You try to respond, but your Latin is patchy at best, and now she's laughing. Welcome to Rome. You are instantly, obviously foreign. You have the wrong belt, wrong sandals, and, judging by the reaction, a deeply offensive haircut. Now you're walking with purpose, even if you don't know where. Because everyone here walks fast, like they got scrolls to deliver or scandals to attend. Slaves hustle past with laundry baskets. Street urchins dart between ankles, and a man in a bright toga gestures wildly as he debates grain prices with someone who might be a senator or just pretending. Historians still argue whether everyday Romans could always tell the difference. You pass a public fountain, shaped like a lion's head. Clean water gurgles from his mouth, and locals fill clay jugs or wash hands without hesitation. You hesitate. Modern instincts say nope, but you're parched. As you approach, a teenager jumps ahead of you and spits directly into the stream. You pivot hard and pretend you weren't that thirsty anyway. Public toilets? Oh, they exist. You follow signs or smell to a communal latrine. There's no privacy, just a marble bench with evenly spaced holes and a shared sponge on a stick soaking in vinegar. You stare at it too long. A man next to you grunts. You flee. By midday, the sun is brutal. Most of the shade is already claimed. Stoops, porticos, alleys crammed with loungers escaping the heat. You find yourself melting beside a statue of a semi-nude hero whose name you don't know. The plinth is hot. So are your feet. And the tunic? It's riding up in ways that make sitting unpleasant. And let's not talk about the bugs. You thought this would be majestic, empire stuff, right? Gladiators, aqueducts, soaring speeches, and sure, all of that's here. But it's jammed between the real, sweaty chaos of life. Rome is alive, and it knows you don't belong. Still, you try. You shuffle toward a quieter side street. A bakery window tempts you. Flatbreads with herbs, maybe olives. You press your nose to the glass. It's warm inside, fragrant. Then you spot the cook sprinkling something suspiciously gritty from a clay pot labeled Sapo. Soap powder. Historians still argue whether Roman bakers sometimes reused old ashes in their flour. You're hoping that was an urban legend. You back away. There's nowhere to sit, no cafes, no cozy corners. Just steps, ledges, and heat. A nearby temple promises shade. You duck under its portico and collapse onto the steps. You're about to relax when you hear sandals approaching. A priest eyes you and frowns. Clearly not a fan of sweaty foreigners, lounging against sacred marble. You scramble to your feet. He mutters something about auspex and walks off muttering. You're 80% sure he cursed you. A local boy wanders by with a monkey on a leash. The monkey wears a tiny red cape. It's the first truly delightful thing you've seen today. You smile. The monkey scowls, throws a fig at your face, and scampers off. The boy demands a coin for entertainment. You dig in your borrowed pouch and hand him the smallest coin. He glares and walks away muttering. Everyone mutters here. You survive your first few hours in ancient Rome, and you're still vertical, which is a minor miracle. But your feet hurt, your dignity's cracked, and you're starting to understand just how far out of your depth you are. You're not dead. You're just confused, underdressed, and deeply caffeinated on stress. Tomorrow you'll try the baths. That's supposed to be relaxing, right? By morning, your feet are still sore, your dignity hasn't recovered, and you've barely slept. Roman nights aren't quiet either. Dogs bark. Drunks shout poetry at statues, and someone plays a pan flute at an hour that feels criminal. But today, you're determined to blend in better, or at least not get cursed by a priest before noon. You start with a plan. Go to the baths. They're legendary, right? Steam, massages, maybe someone feeds you grapes. You imagine lounging like a patrician. Steam rising around you. Scented oils dripping off your well-moisturized Roman self. The reality is different. First, you have to get there. The bathhouse is on the far side of the Subura district, Rome's lively, chaotic, and slightly dangerous neighborhood, where the streets narrow, roofs lean in, and life buzzes in every crack. You dodge vendors hawking eels, a goat with serious attitude, and 3 extremely drunk men arguing about philosophy. One of them might be quoting Seneca, or just really bad poetry. By the time you find a Therme of Titus, you're sweaty, grumpy, and nearly stepped in something that may have once been a pigeon. But the entrance is grand. Arches, columns, statues of toga-clad heroes holding up ivy. Inside, the mood changes. It's quieter, echoey. Men and boys strip off their tunics with practiced ease and strut around like oily marble statues. You hover awkwardly, clutching your clothes and trying not to stare. You're directed to the apoditerium, the changing room, where you realize there are no lockers, just niches in the walls and a lot of side-eye. One of the attendants offers to watch your things for a small fee. You pay. He pockets the coin, nods once, and walks away. You whisper goodbye to your sandals and hope they survive. You follow the flow into the tepidarium, the warm room. It's gentle, steamy, with light filtered through high windows. Your shoulders begin to unclench. You think, okay, this I can handle. You breathe in. The air smells like damp wood and old sweat, but also something herbal, maybe thyme or bay leaves. Someone nearby is scrubbing his back with a bundle of twigs. You consider asking where he got it, but the look he gives you says, don't talk to me. Then it's time for the caldarium, the hot room. You step in and immediately question every life choice that led you here. The air is so thick with heat, you can see it shimmer. Your skin prickles. A man sits on the edge of a stone bench, calmly pouring scalding water over his head like it's nothing. You find a spot as far from the heat source as possible, pretend you're fine, and try not to pass out. The masseur finds you. He's roughly the size of a Roman warhorse and holds a strigil, a curved metal tool used to scrape oil, dirt, and dignity from the skin. You lie down, unsure of the etiquette, and brace for impact. He oils you up with something that smells like olives left out too long and begins scraping. It's not gentle. It's not relaxing. It's exfoliation meets mild assault. You bite your lip and try not to scream. You wonder if this counts as a war injury. Somewhere in the background, someone's chanting softly. Maybe it's a prayer. Maybe it's a coping mechanism. Finally, you stumble into the frigidarium. The cold plunge. This is supposed to be refreshing. You lower yourself into the stone pool and instantly regret it. The cold punches the breath from your lungs. Every nerve-ending screams. A man swims past and chuckles. You try to look like you're enjoying yourself while inching back out. Dried, red, and emotionally compromised, you return to the podaterium. Your clothes are gone. No sandals, no belt, no coin pouch. Just your tunic, folded neatly but damp. You sigh, slide it on, and shuffle barefoot back into the street. Welcome to Roman self-care. Still, you feel lighter. Maybe it's a lack of skin cells. Maybe the embarrassment was cathartic. Or maybe it's the fact that you're now broke, barefoot, and very much aware that you're not a Roman. You wander into the Forum again. This time, you notice more. The layers of it. Vendors, yes, but also graffiti scratched into marble, tiny shrines wedged between pillars. People debating in corners like their lives depend on it. And maybe they do. This city runs on favors, alliances, and who you know. The wrong sneeze at the wrong banquet could ruin your week. You see a man in a senatorial toga pause to give a coin to a street performer, a dancer balancing on a barrel, while playing cymbals with her elbows. The man smiles, the performer bows, and someone nearby rolls their eyes. Historians still argue whether public generosity was genuine kindness or strategic virtue signaling. You pick a bench near a fountain and rest. A child walks by, clutching a wax tablet and stylus, probably headed to school. You remember something about Roman education: rigid, memorization heavy, sometimes violent. Kids had to recite passages from Virgil, do arithmetic with pebbles, and memorize the names of hundreds of gods. You're not sure you pass. You close your eyes for a moment. A breeze stirs the hem of your tunic. The city never stops, but for a moment it softens. Of course, that's when someone dumps a bucket of bath water from a second-story window directly onto your head. Rome. It gives. It takes. It drenches you in lukewarm shame. Now that you've been metaphorically and literally rinsed by Rome, you decide it's time to do something productive, like eat. Your stomach grumbles, echoing off the Forum walls like a small, sad thunderclap. But food here isn't as straightforward as strolling into a sandwich shop and ordering a ham and cheese. For starters, you don't speak fluent Latin, and when you try asking where the nearest cafeteria is, a passing merchant squints at you like you just asked for fermented socks. You mime eating. He points down an alley. You shrug and go. You follow the smells, charcoal smoke, roasted onions, some kind of meat, and end up in a Papina, one of Rome's many street-side taverns. It's not fancy. Think stone counters with clay bowls, worn stools, and a server who clearly despises everyone equally. But it's busy, which seems like a good sign. The menu isn't posted, because of course it isn't. There's a giant terracotta jar embedded in the counter, bubbling with something you sincerely hope is lentil stew. The man behind the counter ladles you a portion before you've even asked. It's hot, salty, and comes with a chunk of barley bread, so dry you briefly consider using it as a coaster. You chew slowly. It's not terrible, just bland. Romans didn't have tomatoes, potatoes, or even pasta yet. Most meals revolve around grains, legumes, fish sauce, garum. More on that horror soon. And whatever you can catch or scavenge. You're halfway through your bowl when you hear someone shout behind you. A small man is being dragged out of the tavern by two larger men. He's protesting that he didn't cheat at dice. One of the large men insists loudly that cheaters belong in the Tiber. There's a scuffle, a broken clay cup, and the faint sound of someone laughing while counting coins. Welcome to Roman lunch entertainment. You slink away before anyone thinks you're part of the dice scandal and head toward the market Macellum if you want to be fancy. Here, food gets serious. There are stalls of olives, wheels of sheep's cheese, little piles of figs so ripe they ooze syrup in the sun. You eye a fishmonger's display, mullet, eel, something suspiciously toothy, and quickly keep walking. And then you smell it, the garum stall. It hits you like a punch to the soul. Imagine fish left in a barrel with salt until they liquefy. Then imagine someone bottling the result and calling it a delicacy. That's garum, Rome's favorite condiment. Rich Romans slather it on everything. Poor Romans dilute it in water and call it soup. You try not to gag as a woman. Next to you samples a spoonful with delight. Historians still argue whether garum was actually delicious or if Romans just lost their taste buds somewhere around Pompeii. You try a safer bet. Honey cakes from a smiling vendor with flour on his nose. He offers you one for a coin and says something about his grandmother's recipe. The cake is sweet, nutty, and sticky enough to glue your teeth together. You nod politely and consider proposing to the man on the spot. Still, food in Rome isn't just about hunger. It's political. Elaborate banquets were status displays where hosts serve flamingo tongues and stuffed dormice to show off their wealth. There's even a famous story about Emperor Vitellius, who once hosted a feast featuring over 2,000 fish and 7,000 birds. You'd never make it through a dinner party here without accidentally offending someone by using the wrong spoon, or worse, refusing a jellyfish course. Back on the street, you see a group of enslaved workers delivering baskets of fruit and wine to a domus, an elite Roman home. You catch sight of its open atrium, with mosaic floors and a shallow pool reflecting the sky. The man of the house, dressed in a crimson-bordered toga, is lecturing a guest about olive yields. You remember that slavery wasn't just common in Rome. It was foundational. Nearly a third of the population were enslaved people, doing everything from cleaning floors to teaching Latin to rich kids. You wonder what would happen if you tried to get a job. Not as a slave, obviously, but as a regular Roman laborer. You ask around and learn about the collegia, guilds of craftsmen and workers. Each has its own rules, its own secret handshakes probably, and you can't just waltz in and apply. You'd need a sponsor, a favor, a whole social web you're not part of. But there's one option, brick carrying. No guild, just pain. You meet a foreman near a construction site. He eyes you, shrugs, and tells you to haul bricks from one pile to another. You do, for 2 hours, under the sun, without shoes. By the end, your arms feel like boiled rope, and the foreman flips you a single coin. Don't spend it all on amphory, he jokes. You don't laugh. You shuffle back through the city, sweaty, dusty, and reconsidering your life choices. You pass a public fountain and splash water on your face. The coolness is heavenly. You notice a woman filling clay jugs, a toddler splashing nearby. Rome's aqueducts supply fresh water all day, and for all its chaos, this place runs on a kind of logic. You think about how the city feeds itself. Grain from Egypt, wine from Gaul, oil from Hispania. The Annona, Rome's grain dole, feeds over 200,000 citizens with monthly rations. It's the only reason the city doesn't riot more often. But it's also a reminder that you, being neither citizen nor connected, are always one misstep from hunger. As the sun dips low and the shadows stretch long over cobbled alleys, you wonder if you've survived the day. Then you hear it, a familiar squawk. You turn, and yes, the goat from earlier is back. It headbutts you in the hip and saunters off like it owns the place. Rome, where even the livestock has attitude. The goat disappears down a side street, leaving you leaning against a warm wall, more tired than you expected for a single day. But you survived the markets, brave garum, and nearly thrown out your back hauling bricks. Maybe it's time to settle down for the night. But then it hits you. Where are you even sleeping? In modern times, you might scroll through an app, book a hotel, complain about the thread count of your sheets. In ancient Rome, your options are, let's say, rustic. If you were a wealthy Roman, you'd retreat to your domus, a private house with columns, mosaic floors, and a slave-run kitchen. But you're not wealthy. You're a nobody in sandals held together by divine will and bad knots. You start wandering, looking for somewhere that looks like a calpona, the Roman equivalent of an inn or boarding house. Eventually, you find one. It's a squat 2-story building near the edge of the Subura district, the crowded, smoky heart of Rome's working-class chaos. The owner, a leathery woman with an eye that doesn't quite track, waves you in. She mutters a price. You hand over your hard-earned coin from the brick-hauling gig, and she jerks her thumb at a ladder. Upstairs is, well, room is generous. It's more like a loft with straw mattresses laid side by side, like the world's least glamorous sleepover. One of the occupants is already snoring. Another is suspiciously sharpening a fishhook. There are no windows, just a hole in the roof that doubles as ventilation and a pigeon entrance. You find an open spot and gingerly lower yourself onto the mattress. It crunches in a way that haste shouldn't. You decide not to ask. Sleep is immediate. For one, there's a chorus of nighttime Rome, distant shouts, cartwheels clattering over cobblestones, someone arguing with a donkey, probably losing. And then there's the fact that the man next to you has removed exactly 0 articles of clothing, including his very muddy boots. You curl into yourself and close your eyes. And then come the bugs. Roman pest control is optimistic. Most homes burned incense to mask the smell of open drains and to maybe drive off vermin. The wealthy use sachets of herbs or imported cedar oil. You get bitten and hope the fleas aren't feeling ambitious. Eventually, somehow, you drift off, only to be jolted awake before dawn by a rooster that seems genetically engineered for maximum volume. The other lodgers start rousing, some heading to early markets, others off to temples or construction sites. You stretch, creaking like a ship's mast, and head outside just as the sky begins to lighten. The streets are slick with morning dew and last night's refuse. A young boy is already sweeping out front of a bakery, with the smell of fresh bread wafts temptingly. You sneak a glance inside. Loaves puffing in dome-shaped ovens. The baker's arms white with flour, his face serene. Roman bakeries were often communal. Apartment dwellers brought dough to be baked professionally. But today, you're hoping for leftovers. He tosses you a slightly burned heel of bread. You nearly weep with gratitude. You munch as you walk, marveling again at Rome's engineering. The city runs on its roads, its water, its sheer relentless organization. Aqueducts funnel water from distant springs, sometimes over 50 miles away, down into fountains and public baths. The Cloaca Maxima, one of the world's earliest sewage systems, carries wastewater into the Tiber. The streets are paved, the forums bustling, and a system of mile markers stretches across the entire empire. And still, somehow, people are late. You pass a group of senators in deep debate, gesturing emphatically with their togas. One is loudly blaming his tardiness on a chariot jam. Another mutters something about omens and auspices. Historians still argue whether Romans actually believed in the omens, or just blamed them when they didn't want to show up on time. You veer away from politics. That's a dangerous game you don't have the coins or the bloodline for. Instead, you visit the thermi, the public baths. They're not just places to clean yourself, but the social centers of a city. Gossip, deals, flirtations, philosophical debates. All happens in the water. You pay a small entrance fee, store your sandals with a surly attendant, and step inside. First, the apoditerium, where bathers strip and store belongings. You keep your eye on your coin pouch. Theft is rampant here, even if the walls are plastered with frescoes of gods watching disapprovingly. Next is the tepidarium, the warm room. It's humid and soothing. You start sweating immediately, and not just from the heat. You're pretty sure the man reclining next to you is a retired gladiator. His nose is flat, his chest scarred, and he's humming a lullaby. You make no eye contact. Then comes the caldarium, the hot bath. You lower yourself and slowly feel your muscles unwind and realize the Romans might have nailed this whole bathing thing. Someone offers you a strigil, a curved blade used to scrape off oil and dirt. You try it. It's equal parts exfoliation and existential crisis. Afterward, you cool down in the frigidarium. The cold plunge is so shocking your soul briefly leave your body. You emerge gasping but refreshed. Clean, fed, and marginally rested, you wander out into the streets again. You pass a ludus, a gladiator training school, where young men are sparring with wooden swords under the watchful eye of a grizzled instructor. Nearby, a group of schoolchildren recite Latin verses in sing-song tones, their teacher flicking a reed if someone stumbles. You're reminded again of the hierarchy here. The rich get redder tutors. The poor get boot camp. You get the weird, in-between status of the historical tourist. You smile grimly, adjust your now sweaty tunic, and keep walking. Rome waits. And somewhere, probably, so does the goat. You head east through the winding alleys, away from the scent of baking bread, and towards something darker, literally and figuratively. If you thought the Roman Empire was all togas and marble, welcome to the underbelly. Let's talk about crime, punishment, and what happens when you end up on the wrong side of the city with too many laws and not enough mercy. You're not exactly sure what law you broke. Maybe it was swiping that fig yesterday. Or perhaps someone saw you giving side-eye to a senator's peacock. Or maybe, and this seems most likely, Rome just needs an extra body for public entertainment. It happens. Either way, two lictors corner you near the forum. You know they're lictors by the bundles of rods they carry. Fasces, symbols of authority, complete with tiny embedded axes. One barks something about a fine unpaid. You try to explain you're not from around here. You mention YouTube. They are not impressed. You're hauled off to a magistrate, which sounds fancier than it is. It's a man in a folding chair in front of a temple, flanked by bored scribes and a small statue of Minerva. He listens for about 6 seconds, nods, and declares you guilty. Of what? Unclear. Justice is not a strong suit here unless you're wealthy or sacred. You are neither. You're sentenced to publicum flagellum, a public whipping, and a short stint in the Tullianum, Rome's prison. And if you thought the bugs in Carpona were bad, just wait. You're marched through the streets. Romans don't shy away from spectacle. People jeer and laugh. One woman throws a turnip. You flinch. Not because it hits you, it doesn't, but because it's clearly been cooked and then forgotten for 3 days. The whipping happens in the forum. It's ceremonial, painful, and humiliating. You bite your tongue to keep from yelling, because apparently, if you cry out, it just encourages the crowd. One historian wrote that Romans valued endurance as a kind of masculine virtue, even in suffering. Historians still argue whether this was stoicism or just deeply repressed emotions wrapped in olive oil and Latin poetry. Then comes the holding cell. The Tullianum isn't a prison in the modern sense. Romans didn't believe in long-term incarceration. Prisons were holding pens, temporary and terrifying. Yours is more like a pit beneath the street, damp and dark. You're shoved inside with a few others. One man's been here so long he speaks only in proverbs. Another is carving a dice set from a bone. You choose a wall and sit very, very still. Time warps underground. The only light filters in from a grate overhead. And you think about that one flickering LED bulb in your bathroom at home and how it now seems like a gift from the gods. You're released after what feels like 3 eternities and 2 mold-induced hallucinations. A man you've never seen before tosses your bag at your feet and says, "Go!" So you do. You stumble back into daylight, blinking like you've just emerged from the underworld. Technically, you have. Rome is fond of metaphors like that. You're sore, humiliated, but alive. And you've learned something vital. Don't draw attention. Rome's legal system is less about fairness and more about hierarchy. Patricians can bribe or charm their way out of most trouble. Plebeians scrape by. Foreigners? You are definitely on your own. You limp down the street until you find a fountain and splash your face. A small girl points at your bruises and asks if you fought a lion. You tell her yes. Let her believe you're a gladiator. It's easier. Speaking of which, later that afternoon, you pass the Colosseum again. A crowd is gathering. The games are on. You don't want to go back in, not after that prison stint, but curiosity wins. You slide through the crowd, this time standing way up in the cheap seats, where the sun burns your scalp and the benches are so splintered you start to suspect they're sentient. The arena below is a scene of controlled madness. Chariots first, then animals, leopards and bears, and even a rhinoceros, shipped in from Africa and clearly annoyed about it. Finally, the gladiators. They're not all men, by the way. Female gladiators, called gladiatrices, did exist, though they were rare. Some fought animals. Some fought each other. Some historians still debate whether they were more of a novelty act or a genuine combat display. You're not sure. All you know is one of them just disarmed a man twice her size, and the crowd is losing it. You try to imagine yourself down there, holding a net and trident, wearing nothing but a loincloth and poor decisions. No thanks. You've had enough violence for one day. You sneak away before the executions start. That's another part of the show. Criminals versus animals, or criminals versus each other. Rome doesn't just punish you. It makes you a spectacle. Even punishment is performance. You walk until the roar of the crowd fade behind you. The sun is setting, and the marble buildings catch firelight like something divine. Rome is beautiful, infuriating, and wildly unsafe. You pass a temple to Mercury, god of travelers and thieves. You nod at his statue. He'd probably enjoy your whole chaotic journey. Then you catch your reflection in a shop window, dirt-streaked face, torn tunic, wild eyes, and think, I'm starting to look like I belong here. You don't. Not really. But you're still alive. That's something. You find a quiet stoop near a bakery and sit. No one bothers you. A cat curls nearby, eyes slitted in judgment. Somewhere, a street performer plays a panpipe with surprising skill. The city doesn't sleep, not really, but it does blink. You rest your head against the wall and promise yourself no more trouble tomorrow. You won't keep that promise. But you mean it. For now. You wake up sore, stiff, and still in the same borrowed century. The sun's barely risen, but the streets are already alive. Merchants setting up stalls, fishmongers shouting like it's a sport, and a familiar stink of too many people and not enough drainage. You stretch, wince, and remember yesterday's run-in with Roman justice. Time to lay low. Maybe do something low-risk like finding a job. Good news, the Roman Empire has a booming economy. Bad news, none of your skills apply. There's not exactly a market for PowerPoint presentations or artisanal latte art. You consider your options. You could try laboring at the docks. You do not. You take one look at the men unloading amphory the size of water heaters and decide your spine has a better chance elsewhere. Maybe something more refined? At a nearby villa, a steward is hiring extra hands for household work. You show up, smile awkwardly, and are immediately put to scrubbing mosaics with vinegar and sand. You're pretty sure you're doing it wrong, but no one seems to care as long as you look busy. It's grueling, back-breaking work. But the payoff is lunch, bread, olives, and a smear of fish paste that tastes like salt and sadness. The villa itself is a marvel. Bright frescoes, intricate floor patterns, and a central courtyard with a pool just for rainwater. The owner, a senator's cousin or something equally vague, wanders by at one point. He doesn't acknowledge you. That's fine. You're beneath notice, which, frankly, might be the safest place to be. You overhear the other servants gossiping. Apparently, the mistress of the house believes in protective charms. She's buried small figurines in the garden, tied with bits of hair and whispers. One older woman swears the house is protected by the spirit of a murdered slave. You don't laugh. You've had enough weird luck lately not to tempt fate. Historians still argue whether Roman homes were truly haunted or if it was just a way to keep slaves in line. Either way, you scrub faster. In the afternoon, you're sent to the market to fetch more vinegar. You pass through Macellum, the bustling food market where every stall is a sensory overload. Honey-drizzled dates glisten beside baskets of oysters and flamingo tongues. Yes, flamingo. Romans are equal parts luxurious and unhinged when it comes to cuisine. One mainstream historical fact. Romans love garum, a fermented fish sauce so pungent it could strip paint. You see a boy selling tiny amphory of it, his hands permanently stained with the smell. You make a mental note never to date a garum merchant. A man waves you over, offering slices of cheese and a smile full of gaps. He sells you the vinegar and throws in a small charm, a bronze coin with a crude engraving of Fortuna, goddess of luck. Keep it, he says. She's fickle. You don't believe in lucky trinkets, but you pocket it anyway. At this point, why not? On your way back to the villa, you pass a group of children playing knucklebones, a mix of jacks and dice using sheep bones. One girl wins 5 tosses in a row and declares herself Caesar. Her friends protest. She threatens to exile them. You approve of her style. By evening, your hands are raw, your back aches, and your legs feel like they're made of lead. But you're fed again, this time porridge and a scrap of dried fig, and even given a corner to sleep in. The floor is cold, but after the tullianum, it feels like a cloud. You dream of modern plumbing. In the morning, you decide it's time to try something new, not because you dislike cleaning mosaics. Okay, yes, entirely because you dislike cleaning mosaics, but also because there's so much more to see. Rome is the center of a vast empire, after all, and you're curious. You head for the Forum Romanum again, Not for punishment this time, but to watch the world spin. This is where the action happens. Political speeches, legal debates, surprise parades, and the occasional riot. It's like social media. But if everyone was in sandals and smelled vaguely of sheep, a man is shouting from a platform. You recognize him from a coin. He's some kind of official bloviating about grain shortages and barbarian incursions. No one really listens. A few women sell snacks from trays. One has what looks like fried dormice, apparently a delicacy. You decline. Nearby, a philosopher is holding court under a fig tree. He's droning on about stoicism, how suffering is a path to virtue. You resist the urge to shout. Easy for you to say, you've never had to clean a Roman toilet. Still, there's something comforting in the buzz of it all. Rome is a mess, but it's a vibrant mess. You're starting to see how people survived it, not through brute strength or wealth, but sheer adaptability and a little madness. Just before sunset, you're approached by a man in a tunic that's suspiciously clean. He offers you a position. Temporary, he says, just helping out with a delivery run. You'll be paid in coin and wine. You agree before asking what kind of delivery. It's scrolls. Lots of them. He works for a scribe near the Palatine Hill and needs someone to run copies between clients. It's not glamorous, but it pays, and your arms still remember those amphorae. Scrolls weigh less. Mostly, he hands you a bundle wrapped in linen and gives you an address. You thank him. He shrugs. If you lose one, you owe double. Neat. You set off through the streets, scrolls under one arm, your luck coin in the other. You pass a small shrine to Janus, god of doorways and transitions, and offer a quick, silent thank you. You're still not sure he's real, but hey, you're here, aren't you? And honestly, that's beginning to feel like a win. You're limping before midday. Your thighs ache like you've been riding a wooden horse, and your feet are now less sandal-clad and more torture burritos. Every step on the gravel road sends a small shockwave of regret through your spine. Marcus, naturally, looks like he could jog backwards while whistling. He doesn't, which is nice of him, but still manages to hum through mile 9 like this is a pleasant hobby. The road bends and straightens, lined on either side by dry fields and the occasional lone fig tree. Crows watch from a distance. You begin to wonder if they're just regular birds or reincarnated Roman senators critiquing your pace. Keep up. Marcus calls over his shoulder. Ostia waits for no one. Ostia, the bustling port at the mouth of the Tiber River. Once the beating trade heart of Rome, a place where spices, slaves, fish, and fortune change hands faster than you could count. You're heading there with a satchel of scrolls bound for a merchant's office. Important stuff, allegedly. You're less convinced it's urgent now that you've tripped twice and someone along the road mistook you for a runaway slave. Historians still argue whether the Roman road system was truly as advanced as legend claims. Sure, it stretched across continents, paved in gravel and stone. But was it comfortable? Not unless your idea of comfort involves blisters and an unnerving number of lizards. You stop at a roadside milestone, trying to catch your breath. The inscription is mostly worn away, but you can just make out 14 miles to Rome. You've come a long way, and your legs know it. Marcus tosses you a hunk of cheese from his pack and points ahead. 1 more hour, he says. You nod and chew and keep going, because what else can you do? Eventually, the salt air hits you first, sharp and briny, a reminder that the sea's not far off. Then you hear the gulls, and finally, through a dusty haze, the outline of Ostia emerges. Warehouses stacked like puzzle pieces, cranes groaning over cargo, long piers stretching into the water like fingers trying to tickle Neptune himself. Ostia isn't pretty, not in the usual way. It's a working port, loud and chaotic, smelling of fish guts and foreign spices. But there's a rhythm to it, a heartbeat. And after a half day of foot pain and dry joke from Marcus, it feels alive. You limp into the merchant district, past towering amphorae, open markets, and men shouting prices in 3 different languages. It's loud, yes, but it's vibrant. Also, someone just dropped an octopus on your foot, but we're not dwelling on that. Your destination is a whitewashed office with a tiled roof and an iron-bound door. Marcus gives a lazy salute to the doorman and leaves you to deliver the scrolls. You knock, hand over the satchel, and are rewarded with a tiny bronze coin and a lukewarm nod. It's not quite the treasure chest you dreamed of, but hey, progress. Outside, Marcus is already elbow deep in a bowl of garum-drenched stew. He gestures to the bench next to him. Eat. You'll need your strength. You do, and it's good in that salty, funky, did a fish just slap me way. Garum, the fermented fish sauce of the gods, or perhaps of the unbothered, is an acquired taste. You haven't acquired it yet, but you respect the ambition. After lunch, Marcus offers to show you around. You agree, partly because your legs won't let you run again, and partly because you're curious. And so you wander through Ostia streets, learning strange and delightful things. Like how apartment blocks here had indoor toilets, luxurious by Roman standards, and yet most people still toss waste into alleys. Progress is weird like that. One quirky tidbit. There's a mosaic in front of the public bathhouse that reads Cave Canem. Beware of dog, accompanied by a hilariously tiny depiction of a dog that looks more confused and threatening. You chuckle, only for Marcus to inform you that, yes, there was once a famous bathhouse dachshund, Ostia's pride. Allegedly, you peek inside the bathhouse and are hit with a wave of steam. Mosaics line the floor in patterns of dolphins and sea nymphs. The scent of oil, sweat, and sulfur fills the air. Inside, men lounge and argue and occasionally get into half-hearted slaps over politics or poetry. A few women peek from behind a curtain on their side of the complex, giggling at some poor guy who's dropped his towel. You think about joining, but Marcus reminds you you're both on the clock. We sleep here tonight, he says, pointing to a modest inn. And tomorrow, back to Rome. You groan dramatically. He laughs. You'll get used to it. Or die. One of the two. That night, you sit on a bench near the docks, watching ships glide in and out of harbor under the moon's indifferent gaze. Sailors shout in Greek and Egyptian, Hebrew and Latin, and somewhere a man plays a wooden flute that sounds like wind over reeds. You close your eyes for a moment and just listen. You've survived worse. You're learning, maybe not thriving, but adapting. Slowly, as you head inside to sleep, Marcus slaps your back and says, "Tomorrow we go faster." And just like that, the moment's over. Your room is tiny, barely a cell, really, with a thin straw mattress and a shutter that won't quite close. The innkeeper warns you about pickpockets and fleas in the same sentence, then wishes you sweet dreams. You try not to think too hard about either. As you lie there, legs stiff and eyes heavy, you wonder how people did this daily. Miles on foot, sketchy pay, fermented fish for lunch. And then you remember, they didn't have a choice. You, on the other hand, somehow volunteer for this trip. You drift off to the distant sound of waves and the rhythmic creak of mooring ropes. You dream about a warm bath, a hot meal, and sandals that don't feel like medieval punishment devices. And of course, the part you that remembers history class wonders. Did any of them ever wish they were born 2,000 years later? Or are you just soft? The dawn creeps in slowly, brushing the sky with bruised purples and pale golds as you wake to the faint clang of iron on stone. It's the sound of Ostia coming alive, merchants setting up stalls, sailors hauling ropes, and the unmistakable barking of dogs who clearly have better things to do than guard a sleepy port town. You haul yourself in the lumpy straw mattress, which has somehow managed to mold perfectly to every ache in your body overnight, and prepare for another day on Roman roads. The innkeeper, a stout woman with a sharp tongue and kinder eyes, slides a wooden bowl of porridge across the rough-hewn table. You swallow it without enthusiasm, thinking that even the worst hospital oatmeal you've ever had might be a delicacy compared to this. Today, you'll be heading toward Rome itself, that sprawling behemoth pulsing with life, danger, and just enough sewage to remind you that advanced civilization has its limits. Walking through the narrow streets of Ostia, you marvel at the intricate network of aqueducts and pipes. Romans were masters of plumbing, after all, and running water wasn't just a fantasy here. It was a well-engineered reality. That said, historians still argue whether these systems genuinely improved hygiene or just spread diseases faster, especially when combined with the infamous public latrines. Speaking of latrines, you try to avoid the communal bathrooms. These weren't private stalls, but long stone benches with holes cut out side by side, where strangers shared space and conversation while attending to nature's call. It's a reminder that privacy is a modern luxury you won't find here. You cross the Forum, where merchants hawk olives, honey, and garum, the infamous fermented fish sauce that lingers like a stubborn relative at a party. The smell is pervasive, but strangely comforting in this ancient city. A small boy darts past, balancing a basket of figs, and you find yourself reflexively stepping aside before realizing you're still in the habit of modern pedestrian etiquette. One quirky fact you overhear from a group of toga-clad gentlemen. Roman soldiers sometimes use urine to bleach their clothes, believing the ammonia helped whiten their tunics. It's not the freshest of methods, but hey, it worked for them. As you meander deeper into Rome's heart, the grandeur becomes overwhelming. Towering columns, elaborately decorated temples, and statues that could probably stare you down and win a staring contest. The Senate building looms nearby, where politics and drama rival even the loudest marketplace gossip. Still, despite the impressive architecture and bustling crowds, you're struck by how filthy the streets are. Garbage, animal waste, and the occasional rogue chicken create a mosaic of urban survival. Rome's sewer system, the Cloaca Maxima, is a marvel of engineering, but it can only do so much when people toss refuse wherever they please. This brings you to an open scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether Rome's rapid expansion caused more harm than good to public health. Sure, the city thrived culturally and economically, but the environmental and sanitary toll was immense. As you navigate toward a crowded tavern, you notice how social life revolves around food, drink, and conversation. The tavern is noisy, filled with the clatter of wooden cups and lively debates about gladiators' politics, and whether Emperor Nero really fiddled while Rome burned. Spoiler alert. Probably not, but it makes a great story. You sit near a hearth, and a grizzled man offers you a cup of watered-down wine. You accept, knowing full well it's safer than the local water, which might contain anything from parasites to, well, who knows what. Romans drank wine not just for pleasure, but as a crude form of antiseptic. You watch as a group of gladiators swagger by, their armor dented but shining, faces marked with scars that tell stories no one wants to hear out loud. You try not to imagine being in their sandals, especially since historians still argue whether gladiators were volunteers, slaves, or a mix of both. The afternoon drifts by in a haze of dust, voices, and the occasional smell that makes you reconsider all your life choices. You find a quiet corner to rest, watching children play with wooden toys and women weave baskets by the fountain. You realize that living here isn't about grand monuments or the glory of empire. It's about surviving the daily chaos, the noise, and the stench with a smile, or at least a grimace you pretend is a smile. As the sun begins to set, casting long shadows over the city, you feel the weight of the day pressing down on you. Rome is magnificent, but exhausting, and you're just getting started. You wake to a chill breeze weaving through the narrow alleyways, carrying with it the mingled sense of roasting chestnuts and smoldering wood. Today, you'll follow the path to a Roman countryside villa, a retreat for the wealthy, but a whole different kind of survival challenge for anyone less fortunate. As you step out of the city's chaotic embrace, the dense noise fades into the rustling of olive trees and distant bleating of goats. The villa emerges, an elegant cluster of whitewashed buildings with terracotta roofs, surrounded by manicured gardens and neatly trimmed vineyards. The sharp contrast with the city's grime is striking, but don't let the beauty fool you. Life here comes with its own set of perils. The villa's owner, a senator with a penchant for lavish banquets, greets you with a smile that barely conceals the sharpness behind his eyes. His slaves and freedmen bustle about, tending to gardens, cooking, and cleaning with a sense of urgent exhaustion. You realize that even the comforts of the elite rely on a harsh hierarchy that would chew you up if you cross the wrong line. You follow a servant to a richly decorated room, where a mosaic floor depicts a scene of Neptune calming the seas. The intricate art makes you wonder about the countless hands that chipped and laid those stones, many probably dreaming of freedom or revenge. As you settle in, the smell of fresh bread mingles with the fragrance of herbs growing in earthen pots. You help in the kitchen, chopping onions and crushing garlic into a mortar and pestle, your arms aching from the repetitive motions. Cooking for the villa means not just preparing food, but also navigating a complex social dance, One wrong move, and you might find yourself serving more than just meals. One fascinating fact you discover is that Roman kitchens often had no chimney. Smoke curled out through small vents, leaving everything walls, ceilings, and lungs thick with soot. It's no surprise that respiratory illnesses were common, especially among slaves who spent hours near the fire. You also learn a quirky detail. Wealthy Romans sometimes used powdered mouse brains in cosmetics, believing it smoothed wrinkles. Whether it actually worked or just smelled terrible remains a mystery, but it definitely falls under the category of things you probably don't want near your face. Historians still argue whether villa life truly offered respite or just another cage disguised as luxury. While the elite enjoyed leisure and fine dining, many slaves lived in cramped quarters, their bodies and spirits worn down by relentless labor. Outside, the afternoon sun warms the vineyard, and you join a group harvesting grapes, hands sticky and stained purple. The work is hard but rhythmic, broken only by the occasional laughter or sharp rebuke from overseers. At one point, you pause to watch a group of children playing by a fountain, their laughter echoing against marble columns. You think about the fragility of innocence in this world, how even in beauty, survival requires vigilance. That night, the villa fills with music and conversation as guests arrive for dinner. The senator toasts to Rome's glory, his voice rich with pride, while servants glide silently, refilling cups and clearing plates. You tuck yourself into a corner, savoring a simple meal of lentils and bread, grateful for this moment's calm amid constant tension. As you lay down to rest, you reflect on how survival in the Roman countryside means mastering both the physical toil and the invisible politics of power, a delicate dance with no clear end. The dawn breaks with a pale, hesitant light as you slip away from the villa's marble splendor, heading toward a different kind of Roman reality, the bustling Forum. This is where the city's heart beats loudest, full of voices, deals, arguments, and a relentless struggle to claim a little space for yourself. It's not just about surviving the day. It's about not getting swallowed whole by the crowd. The Forum's kaleidoscope of activity. Merchants hawk wares from woven baskets, orators shout speeches from makeshift platforms, and citizens in togas weave through the chaos, their sandals kicking up dust. You move carefully, your eyes peel for pickpockets and the sharp elbows of disgruntled shoppers. You learn quickly that personal safety here is a tricky game. The streets aren't patrolled by police but by a loosely organized group of agiles, who often turn a blind eye to the petty crimes that thrive in the noise. To survive, you adopt a practiced look of casual indifference, like you belong, even if every step feels like walking a tightrope. One fascinating fact you pick up is that Roman forums often had designated areas for different trades. Spices in one corner, fabrics in another, creating a sensory overload of smells and colors. You find yourself sneezing more than once, thanks to the dust and pungent herbs like silphium, prized for both cooking and medicine. You discover a quirky detail about Roman street vendors. Some sold stuffed dormice as delicacies, kept in tiny cages and offered as snacks. The thought of nibbling on a glorified rat strikes you as equal parts bizarre and brave. Historians still argue whether the Forum was truly a democratic space, or just a stage for elite power plays disguised as public debate. You witness both the hopeful and the cynical, common folk cheering loudly, only to be drowned out by the voices of patricians. As you wander, you pause near a statue of Julius Caesar, his marble face worn smooth from centuries of admirers rubbing it for luck. You wonder how many desperate souls have pressed their hands here, hoping to steal some of his legendary charisma. Lunch is a modest affair, cold bread, olives, and a slice of hard cheese, eaten while perched on a stone bench. You notice a street performer juggling knives, their sharp edges gleaming dangerously, a reminder that even entertainment here is tinged with risk. The afternoon sun casts long shadows, and you duck into a small shrine, where a priestess murmurs prayers to the household gods. The scent of burning incense wraps around you like a fragile shield against the world's chaos. As evening falls, the floor begins to empty, voices lowering to murmurs, replaced by the clatter of carts returning home. You find a quiet corner, the weight of the day pressing on your shoulders, and realize that surviving in Rome's social whirlwind demands a sharp mind, quick feet, and nerves of steel. Night cloaks the city in velvet shadows as you navigate the narrow alleys back toward your cramped insula, the kind of apartment block where privacy is as rare as running water. The sound of Forum fade behind you, replaced by distant dogs barking and the occasional shout from a drunken reveler. Rome at night feels less like a city and more like a living creature, breathing and shifting in the dark. Your lodging is modest. A small room barely big enough to stretch your legs. The walls thin enough to hear every cough and whispered argument from neighbors. The smell of damp stone and unwashed bodies clings to the air. You realize that while the elite enjoyed marble palaces, most Romans squeeze their lives into these cramped, fire-prone towers. Here's a wild fact for you. Archaeologists have uncovered graffiti scratched onto insula walls. Everything from crude jokes to political slogans and even personal insults. The ancient equivalent of bathroom stall notes, if you will. It's the only real voice of the common people left for us to hear. Historians still argue whether insula life was truly unbearable or if a vibrant community formed amid the cramped chaos. You notice neighbors sharing food, exchanging news, and the odd laugh slipping through the cracks of misery. You light a small oil lamp, its flicker casting dancing shadows, and try to wind down. But the thin walls don't block the sound of dispute escalating next door, ending in slamming doors and angry footsteps. It's a reminder that Roman city life was noisy, unpredictable, and sometimes downright hostile. Your thoughts drift to the water situation. Fascinatingly advanced aqueducts feed the city, but your apartment's tap is little more than a communal basin outside, shared with dozens of others. Clean water is a luxury, and you're careful not to drink too much, lest you find yourself in a latrine line for hours. Speaking of latrines, here's a quirky detail. Romans shared public toilets with no partitions, sitting side by side while chatting or exchanging gossip, no personal space and no shame. The communal sponge on a stick, reused by all, makes you squirm just thinking about it, as you prepare to sleep on your thin mattress stuffed with straw. You recall the constant risk of fires, which could rage through insulae with deadly speed. Fire brigades existed but were limited, and many Romans kept buckets of water and blankets ready just in case. Despite the hardships, you find a strange comfort in the nighttime rituals. Praying to the Lares, the household spirits, asking for protection against disease, crime, and the ever-present threat of poverty. You wonder if those prayers ever reach beyond the flickering shadows of your room. Sleep comes slowly as the city hums around you, a lullaby of distant snoring, creaking wood, and the occasional shout fading into silence. Surviving Rome isn't just about the day's struggles. It's about enduring the night's quiet threats. The dawn breaks with a golden haze filtering through your cracked window, the city waking up with a chorus of calls, merchants hawking their wares, children chasing each other in the streets, and the clatter of wooden carts on cobblestones. You prepare for another day, knowing survival means constant vigilance. Breakfast, if you can call it that, is often a simple porridge or bread dipped in watered-down wine. Markets teem with life, but hygiene is questionable. Meat sold openly on tables, flies swarming over fish, and street vendors using the same cloth to wipe sweat and coins. It's a wonder how Romans managed without food poisoning, but then again, they didn't always manage. Here's an intriguing detail. Wealthy Romans used a fermented fish sauce called garum to flavor nearly everything. It was a ketchup of the ancient world, though arguably far less appetizing to modern palates. You suspect that overuse of garum might have masked the smell of less-than-fresh food at times. Historians still argue whether the Roman diet was healthy or whether it contributed to widespread dental issues and digestive complaints. As you nibble on your hard bread, you realize these debates have merit. Rome was no paradise for the digestive system. You decide to visit the public baths, an essential part of daily Roman life, but not necessarily a relaxing spa day as you might imagine. The baths are crowded, steamy places where gossip, business deals, and political plotting happen amid the soapy water. Bathing was about community and hygiene, but also social hierarchy. You'll want to avoid the sections reserved for senators and their entourages. A quirky note. Romans use a tool called a strigil to scrape sweat and dirt from your skin. Imagine your morning shower replaced by a vigorous scraping session with a curved metal blade. You're not sure whether to be impressed or horrified. The baths also double as fitness centers and social hubs. So while you're scrubbing away, you overhear heated discussions about gladiator matches and the latest imperial edicts. Public baths were a place where news traveled faster than the chariots. Walking back to the Forum, you can't help but notice the towering statues and monuments, Rome's way of showing off its might and culture. Yet beneath the grandeur, you're reminded that most people lived hand to mouth, facing illness, crime, and political upheaval daily. You pass a stall where a street performer juggles flaming torches, earning a few coins, while nearby a prophetess sells charms and foretells futures, reminders that superstition and religion mix with everyday life. By mid-afternoon, the heat bears down mercilessly. You seek shade beneath a colonnade, sipping water from a wooden cup. You think about how you cope with the scorching summers, the dust, and the ever-present threat of disease. Even today, doctors warn travelers about dehydration, but imagine no electrolytes or energy drinks, just sun, sweat, and gritty sand in your sandals. You realize surviving the Roman Empire isn't just about strength or courage. It's about endurance, adapting to a relentless pace, and knowing when to blend in or stand out. The sun dips low, casting long shadows over the city's rooftops, and you find yourself drawn toward the bustling evening activities. As night approaches, the streets grow lively with people seeking respite after a hard day. Vendors light oil lamps, and taverns begin to fill with laughter, song, and the clink of wooden cups. But don't get too comfortable. The Roman night brings its own challenges. Street lighting is scarce, limited mostly to flickering oil lamps that do little to chase away the darkness. You watch your step carefully, mindful of uneven stones and the ever-present possibility of an ambush or pickpocket. Crime spikes after dusk, and the city guard, while present, is neither numerous nor particularly efficient. You realize your modern idea of safe night stroll doesn't apply here. Here's a quirky bit. Roman thieves sometimes use harmless-looking bread rolls filled with sharp objects like nails or glass to trap unsuspecting victims. Imagine biting into a snack only to find it's a trap. It's a reminder that survival often depends on a keen eye and a cautious nature. Historians still argue whether Roman law enforcement was more about deterrence or spectacle. Public executions were as much about fear as justice. Tonight, you catch sight of a crowd gathered around a public square where a condemned man stands ready. The tension is thick, and though you try to look away, you can't help but feel the grim reminder that punishment was swift and brutal. In the tavern, you overhear merchants and soldiers exchanging tales of distant provinces, whispered rumors of rebellions, monstrous beasts, and strange customs. You sip watered wine, thinking about how travel was a luxury few could afford and how most people rarely ventured far from their birthplace. Dinner is modest, lentils, some cheese, a handful of olives, and you note how food varies greatly between classes. The rich dine on exotic spices and imported delicacies, while you make do with what's available at the market. Still, the flavors are bold, thanks to herbs and that ever-present garum. You pass by a small shrine dedicated to household gods, where a family offers a simple prayer and a flickering candle. Religion saturates every part of Roman life, from major state ceremonies to personal daily rituals. Some scholars debate how much Roman religion shaped daily behavior versus being a tool for social control. As the night deepens, you find a quiet corner beneath the arches to rest. You feel the cool stone against your back and listen to the city's nighttime murmurs, the distant barking of dogs, the low hum of conversation, and the occasional shout. Despite the many dangers and discomforts, there's a strange comfort in these familiar sounds, a reminder that life, even harsh and unpredictable, pulses steadily on. Dawn breaks soft and pale, filtering through the wooden shutters of your cramped lodging as the city slowly stirs again. You rise with a sense of weariness mixed with anticipation. Today feels different, charged with the quiet tension of a world on the edge. The Roman Empire is vast, but you know now at a place where every moment demands vigilance and adaptability. You step outside the cacophony of early morning life. Merchants arranging goods, children chasing chickens, and slaves beginning their endless chores. The air smells of wood smoke, baked bread, and the faint, sharp tang of unwashed bodies, comfortingly human in its way. One last historical note to tuck in. The Romans engineered aqueducts that brought fresh water from miles away into the heart of cities, a marvel of engineering that set standards for millennia. But despite this, waterborne diseases were rampant, turning what should have been a blessing into a daily gamble. You spot a street barber sharpening his razors with a whetstone. Hygiene was a patchwork of practices, often effective but sometimes hazardous. Barbers doubled as surgeons, tooth pullers, and gossip hubs, their chairs the medieval equivalent of a social media feed. Historians still debate how Roman urban planning balanced order and chaos, as streets could be narrow labyrinths yet lead to sprawling forums and grand temples. Navigating this maze, you realize that survival depends as much on knowing people as knowing places. On your way to the city gates, you pass a funeral procession. Families mourning their lost, clad in dark wool, carrying torches and offerings. Death was a constant companion in this world, and funerary rites were vital, a way to honor ancestors and secure favor from the gods. The market is already alive, and you barter for a few meager supplies. Try to remember the names of spices and herbs that might preserve your food or soothe your ailments. Each transaction is a small battle of wits and patience. You catch a glimpse of a gladiator training in a nearby courtyard, muscles taut, sweat gleaming under the morning sun. The spectacle of the arena is both terrifying and fascinating, a brutal reminder of power, politics, and survival. As the city hums with life, you feel a quiet gratitude for having survived this long. You carry the weight of everything you've learned, the relentless pace, the ever-present dangers, the tiny moments of beauty amid hardship. And as you walk toward the horizon, you know one thing for sure. You wouldn't last a day here without a mix of cunning, courage, and a little luck. So, as the empire stretches endlessly before you, its roads winding into legend, you take a deep breath, ready for whatever comes next. Now let's slow down and gently drift toward rest. Imagine the sun setting over the ancient city, the bustling streets quieting, the scent of olive trees and distant sea breeze softening the air. The noise fades, replaced by the gentle rustle of leaves and the faint murmur of a nearby fountain. You breathe in slowly, feeling the weight of the day lift, your mind easing into calm. The trials and triumphs of the Roman world fade into a peaceful twilight, and you find yourself wrapped in the comforting embrace of history's quiet moments. Sleep well, knowing you've journeyed through time and place, and that tomorrow brings new stories to explore. Sweet dreams.